Somewhere, 20 kilometers outside Tripoli, in the middle of Libya's scorched desert, sits a fortress built not to hold men, but to erase them. They called it Abu Salim, a concrete tomb for the politically inconvenient. A place where hope didn't just fade, it was hunted, gutted, and left to rot. Inside cell 17B, a man stirred on a filthy, sweat-soaked mattress. His name was Farid Al-Hashimi. 3 years. 3 years in a cage the size of a bathroom stall. 3 years since he last saw the sun. The mattress beneath him smelled of 100 other broken men. The metal springs stabbed at his back like dull knives. He didn't even flinch. Not anymore. Pain was just part of the furniture now. Farid rolled over and stared up at the tiny, barred window carved high into the wall. A single beam of morning light leaked through it like a lie. It was morning again. Hell had a sunrise. He stood slowly, every joint in his body cracking like dry twigs. And as he did every day, he dropped into a silent, personal ritual: push-ups, stretches, controlled breathing. Motion was resistance. Strength, even imagined, was survival. Weak men didn't last long in Abu Salim. After his routine, he shuffled toward the wall and scratched a small line with a shard of something sharp. 94 marks. He didn't need them to count the days anymore, but it reminded him that time still moved. That he still was. 3 years since that protest in Benghazi. 3 years since they took him. 3 years since he'd seen the face of his wife Layla, or held his baby daughter Samira, who would be nearly 5 now. He had missed her first words, her first steps, her entire life. "I'm a journalist, not a terrorist," he had screamed during those first interrogations, words now burned into his soul. "All I did was tell the truth." But in Gaddafi's Libya, truth was the most dangerous weapon of all. A metal clatter pulled him back to the present. The food slot opened. A hand shoved a dented aluminum bowl of watery porridge and a slab of rock-hard bread through it. Farid took the bowl and nodded, an instinct, a relic of humanity. A thank you? His own private rebellion. "Today's your lucky day, rat," a voice growled. Hamid, one of the guards. Puffy, bloodshot eyes. A jagged scar across his cheek. A walking warning sign. "You're being moved to Block D." Farid's breath caught. Block D. The place where hope truly died. Block D was where they sent the dangerous ones. The ones who wouldn't break, couldn't be silenced. Men like Farid. But no one came back from Block D. Not intact. Some didn't come back at all. "Why?" he asked, trying to keep his voice level. Hamid smirked. "Ask your freedom-loving friends. They're writing about you again. Got the brass all nervous." The hatch slammed shut. Farid leaned against the cold concrete wall, the weight of it pressing into his spine. So, someone out there remembered him. His articles, about oil corruption, forced disappearances, torture chambers. Someone was still listening. Still fighting. But Block D. That meant the clock was ticking. By noon, 2 guards arrived. Silent. Grim. They shackled his hands and led him down a long corridor pulsing with sickly fluorescent light. As they passed other cells, inmates pressed their faces against the bars, watching. Change, in a place like this, was rare. And always ominous. Block D was colder. Quieter. Even the air was heavier, thick with the absence of hope. They shoved him into a new cell. Inside, a man sat cross-legged on the floor, thin as a skeleton, with a white streaked beard and eyes like dry wells. "Welcome to the real abyss," the man said softly. "I'm Malik." Farid nodded. "Farid. Journalist. From Benghazi." "I know," Malik said, studying him. Your pieces about the oil money, they made people very angry. Powerful people. Farid narrowed his eyes. You were Air Force? Malik gave a dry laugh. Was. Refused to bomb civilians in Tobruk. Now I'm a traitor. They spoke in whispers. Everyone in Block D knew the walls had ears. Malik had been there 5 years. He described Block D as a slow erasure. The regime didn't kill you with bullets, they deleted you. From memory. From the world. No grave. No name. Just gone, he said. That night, Farid lay on a new mattress. Same moldy stench, same broken springs. But this time, his thoughts didn't spiral. Instead, he remembered Layla's laugh, how the sea breeze tangled her hair. The way her fingers curled around their newborn daughter. He closed his eyes. I have to survive, he whispered. I have to get back to them. But even as he said it, something inside him cracked. Block D didn't have exits. Only endings. And for the first time since his arrest, Farid let the idea of escape take root. Not a dream. A plan. The days blurred. Time here wasn't measured in hours, but in interrogations. The guards dragged him to a room with no windows, asked the same questions. Over and over. About foreign contacts. About revolutionaries. He gave them the same answer every time. I wrote the truth. Malik, meanwhile, became his guide. In this dark world, knowledge was light. A prison built by Italians during colonization, Malik whispered during one of their brief courtyard walks. Then Gaddafi turned it into his own hell. But no prison is perfect. All have cracks. Farid leaned in. You ever think of escaping? Malik paused. Every day. But not alone. Alone, it's suicide. As the weeks passed, Farid began to notice details. The guard shifts. The blind spots in the cameras. And then, there was Yasin. A young guard. Too soft. Too hesitant. From Benghazi, Malik whispered. They forced him into service. Threatened his family. He hates it here. Farid watched him closely. Yasin sometimes brought extra water. One night, he slipped Malik a book, The Count of Monte Cristo. Malik smirked. How poetic. The prisoner who escapes the impossible. They read it in turns, hiding it in a crevice under the floorboards. But for Farid, it was more than a story. It was blueprint. 2 months into Block D, Farid made his move. During morning rounds, with no other guards in sight, he looked Yasin in the eyes. My daughter's in Benghazi, he whispered. She's 5 now. I don't even know if she remembers me. Yasin froze. Blinked. Then nodded barely. Next day, when he brought food, he whispered back. They're safe. Your wife and daughter. They fled to Tunisia. Farid felt something explode in his chest. They were alive. Now, he had a reason beyond survival. He had a mission. Days in Block D didn't pass. They dissolved. Each one identical. Each one gray. But beneath the surface, Farid's mind sharpened like a blade. The idea of escape no longer haunted him, it possessed him. Every glance, every step, every whisper he heard in the courtyard became data. Every flicker of a camera, every tremble in a guard's voice, a variable in the equation of freedom. And Malik had maps in his head. They would sit in the exercise yard, slowly circling the concrete pit like 2 old men pretending to talk about weather. But their conversations were code. The west corridor used to connect to an old loading dock. Now it's locked, but the vent system still runs above it. Watch the towers at sunset. The shift change happens exactly 18 minutes after call to prayer. There's one place where the lights flicker. Circuit board must be bad. Could be a blind spot. Farid was learning the tangle of Abu Salim by heart. But he needed more. And that meant Yasin, the young guard with the tired eyes and too much conscience. The one man on the other side of the bars who hadn't yet been hollowed out by the system. Their conversations began as passing glances, crumbs of humanity. Then one morning, as Yasin handed over their food trays, Farid whispered, "They said my family is in Tunisia. Is that true?" Yasin froze. Glanced up. Nodded. "They made it," he murmured. "Your name was on a list they were watching. Your wife got out just in time." That one sentence lit a wildfire in Farid's chest. He was alive. They were alive. Now they just had to be reunited. But Block D was a tomb. And if Farid didn't act soon, it would become his permanent address. At night, lying on his cot, Farid replayed the plan in his mind again and again. A sequence of impossible steps. Each one with its own price in blood. Cameras rotate every 12 seconds. There's a 4-second blind spot near the utility stairwell. Guards shift at 2 a.m., 10 a.m., and 6 p.m. But Yasin says there's a lull between 9:47 and 10:03. The trash exit leads out the east wing, old Italian design. Reinforced door, but Yasin says the vent nearby is rusted through. It wasn't just a plan. It was a prayer with blueprints. Farid began to sketch a rough map on scraps of cloth, using damp bread dipped in charcoal. Malik corrected him where necessary. "No," he'd whisper. "That stairwell has motion sensors now. But the laundry chute? Still unsecured, just filthy." Piece by piece, a route took shape. But even the best plans crumble without a miracle. And for Farid, that miracle had a name, Yasin. One night, Farid caught the young man during solo rounds. "I need your help," he said. "There's no one else." Yasin didn't answer. His fingers trembled on the keys at his belt. "I don't want to die in here," Farid whispered. "My daughter deserves to know her father didn't vanish in a cage." Yasin swallowed. "You have no idea what you're asking. They watch us too. You think I'm free?" "I know you're not," Farid said. "That's why you understand." Days turned into whispers. Whispers turned into alliances. Yasin began supplying them with scraps, old schedules, a broken radio wire, even a chipped utility knife hidden inside a loaf of bread. "Don't talk when others are near," he warned. "Some guards would sell you out for a cigarette." Malik handled the engineering. Farid handled the strategy. Yasin, he was the key that turned the lock. But time was not their friend. "They're transferring me," Yasin said one night, eyes full of panic. "They're moving all Easterners out of sensitive posts. They don't trust us anymore." "How long do we have?" Farid asked. 2 weeks. Maybe less. That was it. The countdown had begun. One night, under a moonless sky, Malik leaned over and whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll fake a heart attack." Farid blinked. "What?" "During courtyard walk. Yasin will be on duty. The new guy, he's young. Nervous. Probably never had to handle anything real. And you'll knock him out." Farid stared at him. "What if I fail? Then you won't live long enough to regret it." There was no time for hesitation. Malik handed him the knife, just a sharpened metal sliver, but deadly enough. "You aim behind the ear. Straight fast. One motion." Farid nodded. His mouth was dry. His hands were steady. The next day was heat and silence. The concrete yard shimmered under the sun as Farid and Malik walked in circles, as they always did. Except today, every step was loaded. And then, Malik clutched his chest and fell, gasping. The young guard, clearly a recruit, panicked, dropped his weapon, ran to him. In that heartbeat of chaos, Farid moved. One strike. Fast. Silent. The guard collapsed, unconscious. Farid grabbed his pistol, keys, and radio. Dragged the body behind a water barrel. Malik rose to his feet, smiling grimly. "Still got it," he said. "Come with me," Farid said. Malik shook his head. "No. My legs won't last 2 kilometers, let alone 20. But you carry the story?" They embraced. No more words. Farid turned and disappeared into the corridor. The prison was a labyrinth, but Farid's mind ran like a machine now. He moved quickly, ducking cameras, hugging walls, slipping through side doors. Twice he had to freeze behind cleaning carts as guards passed. The closer he got to the technical wing, the more the fear burned in his chest like fire. At the end of a service hallway, he found the waste disposal room, a metal door with a red tag. He flipped through the guard's keys. Third one fit. Click. Inside, darkness. Old pipes. The sharp smell of bleach and dust. At the far end, a small door with an electronic lock. His heart dropped. Yasin had warned him. If the electronics failed, there might be another way. Farid scanned the room. There, in the corner, a rusted ventilation shaft, partially unbolted. He climbed a crate, slipped the knife from his shoe, began unscrewing the bolts, fingers raw. The shaft groaned. One last tug. It gave way. He crawled inside. The metal scraped his skin raw. Dust filled his throat. His body ached with every inch forward. But he kept crawling. Because backward no longer existed. And then light. A sliver of daylight through a final vent. He reached it. Saw sand, sky, and freedom. With shaking hands he loosened the bolts. Pushed the grate. It fell with a thud. He dangled from the vent edge and dropped. Pain shot through his ankle, but he forced himself upright. He was outside. For the first time in 3 years, Farid breathed free air. But freedom wasn't a line you crossed. It was a desert you had to survive. And ahead of him lay a minefield. Outside Abu Salim, the silence was overwhelming. But it wasn't peace. It was the silence of something waiting to kill you. Farid pressed himself into the sand, sweat already beading across his forehead despite the early hour. Ahead of him lay the real prison, a minefield. Marked by sun-faded flags and rusted skull and crossbones signs, it stretched like a broken halo around the compound. Gaddafi had been paranoid. Back in the 80s, he had the army bury hundreds, maybe thousands, of landmines in the desert. Some were probably dead now. Most? Still waiting. Farid scanned the ground. Malik's voice echoed in his mind. "Watch the animals. Lizards. Desert foxes. They find the safe paths." So he waited. Motionless. Eyes fixed on the sand. Then a twitch. A small, quick-footed lizard darted across the dunes. It moved along a strange, zigzagging path, almost invisible in the wind-blown sand. Another. Same route. That was it. That was his line through death. Farid tore strips from his shirt, wrapped them around his feet. The rubber prison sandals were worthless in this terrain. The fabric might burn, but at least he could move. He whispered a prayer. Then stepped forward. Every step was war. He moved slowly, matching the lizard's path exactly. Each footfall pressed into the hot sand with surgical precision. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure someone, somewhere, could hear it. 10 meters. 15. 30. Then sirens. Back at the prison, alarms screamed like wounded animals. His absence had been discovered. A moment later, a gunshot cracked through the air. Then another. Farid didn't stop. He couldn't. He was halfway through when he heard shouting behind him. Guards on the tower. Spotting him. But they didn't fire. They wouldn't risk detonating a minefield with a live prisoner in it. Too messy. Too public. That gave him minutes. Maybe seconds. He kept moving faster now. No longer tracing every lizard print, just aiming for the general line. A rock gave way underfoot. His legs sank. He froze. Then realized it was just a sand hollow. No click. No explosion. He pulled himself free and ran. When he reached the edge of the minefield, his legs gave out. He collapsed, gasping for breath, skin blistered, blood pounding. He was out. He was alive. But ahead lay the Sahara. Endless, merciless. And the sun was just beginning to rise. Farid moved only at night. He rested under rocky outcroppings by day, sucking moisture from his lips and chewing stale bread crusts he'd stashed in his prison tunic. His ankle, twisted in the vent shaft, had begun to swell. Each step was agony. His water? Half a bottle. That had to last until hope. But he had a compass. A crude one Malik had taught him to make, a magnetized needle floating in a bottle cap. It pointed north. He needed east. At night the desert transformed. The heat faded. The silence deepened. And above him, the stars exploded across the sky. Farid walked by starlight, whispering the names of his wife and daughter like a mantra. Layla. Samara. Layla. Samara. His thoughts wandered. What would she look like now? Would she remember his voice? Would Layla still believe he was alive? And more terrifying, what if they didn't? He walked for hours. Rested. Walked again. Every muscle in his body screamed. But he didn't stop. Because the alternative was to lie down and become one more nameless skeleton in the sand. On the third day, he saw dust on the horizon. A patrol. Military. Moving fast. He threw himself behind a cluster of rocks. Watched as the jeep crawled across the dunes like a mechanical insect. It passed within 100 meters. He could see the silhouettes of soldiers in the turret. One turned. Looked straight toward him. Farid didn't breathe. Then, as if by grace, the jeep kept moving. Disappeared. But he knew now, they were hunting him. And they were close. That night he changed tactics. Instead of going east, he moved south, a diversion. A misdirection. After a few kilometers, he curved back east again, leaving no straight trail. He was learning to think like prey. By dawn, he saw something on the horizon, a ridge. And beyond it, maybe. Yes. Mud brick structures. Tents. Smoke. A Bedouin camp. He stumbled forward. His lips cracked, his skin scorched. His body was giving out. But then, he collapsed. He awoke to cool water on his lips. A face hovered above him, lined, weathered, ancient. A man with sunbeaten skin and eyes like dark stones. Hamdulillah, the man murmured. You're alive. Farid tried to speak. Couldn't. Just swallowed. The water felt like salvation. You're lucky I found you when I did, the man said. Another hour, and the desert would have taken you. He was in a tent. Goat skins under him. a breeze moving through the canvas walls. He wasn't dreaming. "My name is Ibrahim," the man said. "Farid," he whispered. Ibrahim frowned. "That's a prisoner's name." Farid froze. His wrists still bore faint bruises from the cuffs. His clothes were torn. "Obvious. I escaped," he said. Ibrahim said nothing. Just looked at him. "My family, they're in Tunisia. I need to reach them. Please." After a long silence, Ibrahim nodded. "We've lost many sons to Gaddafi's prisons. Maybe you were one of them. Maybe not. But no man survives that desert by accident." He stood. "You will rest. You will eat. Then you will move." Farid stayed hidden in the camp for 2 days. At night, he heard the engines of military vehicles. Once, soldiers even entered the village, but Ibrahim spoke to them calmly, without fear. "We've seen no strangers. Only our goats and the sand." Farid watched from a hidden tent as the soldiers poked through the camp. One of them stood just meters from him. Then, at last, they left. On the third morning, Ibrahim came to him with robes, a head wrap, and a small pouch of dates and bread. "You'll join a trading caravan," he said. "Disguised. They're headed toward the coast. From there, you'll find your own way." "Why help me?" Farid asked. Ibrahim looked away. "My eldest son was a journalist. They took him 10 years ago. Maybe he was an Abu Salim, like you." Farid hesitated. "I don't know. There were so many names lost." Ibrahim nodded, eyes glistening. "Then carry his name with you. Bring it to the border. Bring it past the wall." The caravan left before sunrise. 6 camels. 8 men. Farid rode in silence, dressed like a Bedouin, head low. His heart beat with every step of the camel. Every checkpoint might be his last. And still, he was getting closer. To the sea. To freedom. To home. The camel swayed like a ship on rough seas. Farid's legs were numb, his throat raw, and the inside of his cheeks torn from biting down in pain. But every step took him closer. The coastline of Libya wasn't on any map in his pocket. It was drawn in his bones. Salt on the breeze. The scent of water after endless sand. And far on the horizon, beyond a cluster of craggy hills, smoke. Not a fire. Not destruction. Cooking smoke. Civilization. The caravan leader, a man named Khalid, signaled to dismount. They made camp among rocks. Fires were lit. Water boiled for tea. But Farid stayed back, sitting alone, staring at the dark outline beyond the ridge. A coastal town. Or a checkpoint. Or both. He needed a boat. He needed a way out of Libya. Tunisia was close, just one night's sail across the water. That night, Khalid sat beside him and handed over a small steel cup. "Mint tea," he said. "Tastes better than it smells." Farid drank. It burned going down. "I know who you are," Khalid said finally. "The man from Block D." Farid froze. Khalid continued. "Ibrahim told me. Said you were hunted. But not broken. Said if anyone could survive Abu Salim, it was you." Farid stayed silent. "I respect that," Khalid said. "But I also have to protect my men. Soldiers are crawling all over the region. The regime's falling apart. And when men with guns get scared, they shoot everything." Farid looked at him. "You want me gone?" Khalid shook his head. "I want you safe. And fast. There's a man in the village below. Hassan. He runs boats. Not legal ones. But he doesn't ask questions." Farid sat up straighter, Can you take me there? Khalid nodded. Before dawn, while the soldiers sleep, they rode out with just 2 camels. No torches. No sound. The trail twisted through gullies and dry streambeds. In the distance, gunfire echoed, sporadic, distant. The regime was cracking. At the edge of the village, Khalid pointed. See that shed? Behind the olive press? That's him. Hassan. Tell him you came from Ibrahim. Farid slid down and grabbed Khalid's arm. Thank you. I won't forget. The traitor nodded. Make it out. That's enough. Then he turned and vanished into the dark. The shed looked abandoned. Rusted tin roof, half buried under sand. But inside, a lantern flickered. Farid knocked once. Nothing. Twice. A latch clicked. The door creaked open. A heavy-set man in a fisherman's tunic squinted at him. You're late, he grunted. Come in. Farid stepped inside. The place reeked of fish and diesel. Nets hung from the rafters. A small radio hissed on a shelf, crackling voices in Arabic. 300 dinar, Hassan said. Boat leaves tonight. 1 spot. I don't have money, Farid said. Hassan looked up slowly. Then you don't have a boat. Farid reached into his robe and pulled out a cloth bundle. Inside, his prison tag. Stamped steel. Abu Salim. His number. His name. Keep it, Farid said. One day, it'll be worth more than any money. Hassan stared at it. His face didn't move. Then he turned, grunted, and pointed to the back door. Wait with the others. There were 6 of them. A woman with 2 children. A teenage boy in a bandaged arm sling. A bald man who said nothing, just stared at the sea. All silent. All shadows. Farid sat against the wall and listened. The radio on the shelf played bursts of static between words. Then, he heard it. Tripoli, under siege, reports of army defections. Misrata uprising confirmed. He stood, heart pounding. Repeat, protests in Benghazi have turned into armed resistance. Several military units switched sides. He wasn't imagining it. Libya was burning from the inside. The revolution had started. The boat came just after midnight. A small fishing vessel, barely big enough to carry them. The woman wept as her children were lifted aboard. The bald man helped the teenager. Farid climbed in last. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared. They sailed in silence, hugging the coast, using the stars to guide them west. Farid sat at the bow, watching the desert fade into darkness behind him. He thought of Malik, of Yasin, of Ibrahim, and of Layla, of Samira. But peace wasn't waiting. Half an hour out, a second vessel appeared. Faster. Metal hull. No lights. Military grade. The pilot of their boat cursed. Coastal patrol. Gaddafi's dogs. Farid's blood turned to ice. We can't outrun them, the pilot said. They'll shoot. Farid scanned the horizon. No rocks. No coves. Just open sea. Unless. He stood. Kill the engine. Drift. What? Trust me. The pilot shut the motor. Silence swallowed the boat. Only the sound of waves and wind remained. Farid took off his robe. Jumped into the water. What the hell are you doing? Someone hissed. Farid swam under the boat, gripping the rudder. Hiding. The patrol boat approached. A spotlight flared. Voices shouted. The woman screamed. The teenager tried to stand. The pilot yelled, "We're just fishing! Refugees!" Footsteps hit their deck. A flashlight beam cut through the night, sweeping over faces. Farid held his breath under the hull. Salt burned his throat. His lungs screamed. He counted. 10, 15, 20. Then shouts. The spotlight swung back to shore. The patrol had a report. Gunfire inland. A more urgent target. They left. Farid surfaced, gasping. The pilot pulled him back aboard. "You're insane," the man said. "But brave." Farid laughed, coughing seawater. "Not brave," he said. "Just not finished yet." The rest of the journey passed in silence. By dawn, the Tunisian coast appeared, pale cliffs and green fields shimmering like a hallucination. They docked at a forgotten inlet. No guards. No questions. Farid stepped off the boat. Sand squelched underfoot. He was out. After 3 years. After torture. Mines. Heat. Interrogations. Betrayals. He was free. But freedom wasn't a finish line. It was a beginning. And Farid still had one more journey left. To find his wife and daughter. To become more than a ghost. To rebuild a life stolen by war. But he would not do it as a victim. He would do it as a witness. The Tunisian sun was softer. Kinder somehow. Or maybe it was just that Farid could finally walk without shackles on his ankles and someone watching him from behind a rifle. But freedom wasn't what he thought it would be. It wasn't a gate you walked through. It was a fog. He had a name. He had a mission. But no ID, no passport, no money. And even in a land without war, men like him were ghosts. He spent his first 2 nights sleeping near the docks, hiding from police patrols. He stole fruit from a market stand. The shame cut deeper than any prison whip, but the hunger was louder. Then, on the 3rd morning, he met Nadia. A medical volunteer, Tunisian-born, back from France to help with the flood of refugees. She saw him near the bus depot, sick, barefoot, sunburned, eyes burning like coals. "You look like you fell out of the sky," she said, offering him a bottle of water. "I fell out of hell," he answered. She took him to a refugee clinic. There, doctors cleaned his feet, gave him antibiotics, fed him real food, warm lentils and bread. He cried while eating. Couldn't help it. Then she asked the question. "Who are you really?" He told her. Everything. Abu Salim. The protest. The interrogation. Block D. Yassin. Malik. Ibrahim. The boat. Everything. She believed him. Or at least, she wanted to. The next step was the Red Crescent office. They took down his name. Farid Al-Hashimi. Born in Benghazi. Married to Layla Al-Sadiq. Daughter Samira. Age 5. Last seen, 2017. The clerk tapped at his keyboard. Brows furrowed. Finally, he said, "We have a Layla Al-Sadiq. Arrived through the Ras Sajdir crossing. Temporary housing in the Zarzis camp." Farid stood up so fast the chair fell over. "Can I see her?" The man shook his head. "You need clearance." "ID. Official process." Farid leaned in, fists clenched. "She's my wife. That's my child." "I believe you," the man said gently. "But this is a system. And the system moves slow." Farid had spent 3 years being broken by a system. He wasn't going to wait now. That night, he took a bus to Zarzis. 6 hours through desert and broken roads. He arrived at dawn. The camp stretched across the dunes like a city made of hope and heartbreak. Tents, tarps, makeshift clinics. Laughter. Crying. shouting in 10 different dialects. He asked around, showed people a torn photo, Layla and Samira, from the inside of a book Malik had smuggled him. Finally, a boy pointed. That tent. Blue tarp. Third row. Farid ran. She didn't recognize him at first. He stood at the flap of the tent, trembling. She looked up from a pot of water. Eyes sunken, face thinner, but still her. Layla, he whispered. She froze. Then, slowly, like the world had slowed down, she dropped the pot. Farid? He nodded. And then they were in each other's arms. No words. Just sobs. Of pain. Of relief. Of everything that had been stolen. Samira peeked out from behind a blanket. She was taller now. Her eyes wide. Suspicious. But when Farid knelt and opened the tiny, torn cloth elephant he'd carried all this way, she stepped forward, touched his cheek, said, Baba? And he broke. They stayed in Zarzi's for 2 weeks. Farid slept on the floor beside them. He couldn't bear to be apart. Even the nightmares grew quieter. The screams in his head faded. He helped repair tents, hauled water, cooked, anything to feel useful. But something gnawed at him. He'd survived hell, escaped death. But he hadn't told the world what he saw. He hadn't spoken for the dead. Nadia returned one afternoon with news. There's a journalist from Paris, investigating Abu Salim, looking for survivors. Farid stared at her. He wants a story? He wants witnesses. 2 weeks later, Farid sat in a recording booth in Tunis. Across the table sat a man with a notebook and a camera. Behind glass, a translator listened. They hit record. Farid began to speak. He spoke for hours. About the cells. The torture. About Malik. Yasin. The minefield. The boat. But also about the quiet acts of resistance. The moments of dignity. The humanity buried under concrete and fear. When he finished, the journalist was crying. This will change things, he said. Farid smiled. No. It won't. Not yet. But it will remind people that some things are worth fighting for. Months passed. With Nadia's help, Farid applied for asylum in France. The paperwork took time. But one morning, an envelope arrived. A visa. 3 names. Farid. Layla. Samira. He stared at it like it might vanish. On the flight out of Tunis, Samira sat by the window. Farid watched the desert shrink below them. He thought of the cell. The guards. The men who never got out. And he whispered their names. Then looked at his daughter. You know, he said. Once I almost forgot what your voice sounded like. She looked up, smiling. You'll never forget now, she said. And he didn't.
If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching.